Hello everyone, I'm Chinar and I have looked at the sanitation sector for as part of the FemLab project. What I'm doing here is a case study, but I'll briefly go into the sort of background to place where my case study is positioned. So overall, generally sanitation work in Hyderabad is taken care of by the GHMC, which is the Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation. What they do is in the past, they had contracted out all the sweeping and collection of wastes in various units in the city. So some of them, they were handling themselves, so it was publicly owned, and the others, they were contracted out, so they were privately owned. However, there was very little accountability as far as payment of workers was concerned. There was a lot of media coverage about this, that the contractors would pay the workers very little. They might not pay them at all sometimes, and so on. So and plus most contractors did not match the provident fund and the employee state insurance. So there were all of these issues, which is in 2015, I think. Since then, GHMC has been what has been done is that every unit is cleaned by an SHG, a self-help group, which consists of 7 women who get paid directly by the government. So this sort of takes away from the middlemen the sort of issues that were happening because of that. So this sort of a public-private partnership that was taken up, the contract based, was not particularly successful. But while we were collecting data, there was one other kind of private player which sort of came up, which I got interested in, which is at a different part in the chain. So there are a handful of startups, actually. There isn't just one, which have taken these opportunities to start to collect waste, one thing, and to do various things with it. So some of them simply just collect waste and dump them, particularly in areas which might be, one, difficult to reach, or two, that they are residential areas. So all in one, they'll collect the waste and then dump them in the place where anyway GHMC was the landfill site or a transfer site. But the other is that those which collect waste and then they recycle it. Now, this is a particularly profitable venture, which is why there are like 5-6 startups already in this space. All of them are at a very small scale so far. But they're also expanding very rapidly. So there are, in this presentation, I'm looking at 2 private companies which have emerged in the last 5-6 years, say. One that manages the collection of waste and then recycles it. I'll call it the recycling company. And the other, which is a housekeeping company, which collects waste from within residential areas. Now, both of these, while they're sort of small, they employ predominantly women workers. Without going into much detail, I'll go into some of the key findings. So now the recycling company that I looked at has about 80 workers, out of which 60 to 70 are women. The male workers are employed for tasks like driving, loading, unloading, and such things. Women, on the other hand, work in sorting the wastes, scanning them, and some of them are also required to move bags and so on. So I don't want to particularly say that the division of work is on one singular basis, division of work between the men and the women, but it's just that it's the going around and collecting that is usually taken care of by the men, in spite of the fact that there might be women accompanying them there also, but they try not to do it. That's what the management tells me. The housekeeping company, on the other hand, they provide sanitation related services in residential areas. Like I mentioned, they have about, in one residential colony, which has about 15 buildings, they have around 50 workers, again, most of who are women. The task, again, of cleaning and sweeping are given to women, although there were a few men, 3 in the colony that I looked at, who were also employed in this work. On the other hand, the supervisors, there were 15 supervisors, I think. Out of them, a majority were men. There were only, I think, 3 to 4 female supervisors. Now, to start with, both of these companies, they give the employee state insurance and the employee provident fund. They're very particular about that. Since they're private companies, there's, I mean, not following that sort of a law would be much more detrimental for them, is what, again, a manager said to me. The salaries that the workers get, they directly go into their account. So they have their other information, their bank account information, and so on. Like previous research shows, we know that women workers do not always have access to their accounts. So this may not be so much a matter of, it's difficult to say why exactly this is. So what I mean is that Uma, for example, a worker at the recycling company, she's a 52-year-old woman who's worked at the recycling company for about 5 years now. And as part of the onboarding, like I said, the company took her bank information and so on, which she gave and which she has all the information related to it, but she does not operate the account herself. Her son uses the ATM card. It is his number that is associated with her Aadhaar and her bank account. And she said that she doesn't need to manage this anyway. One, because she doesn't need to manage it, and second, because it is difficult to learn at her age, is how she would describe it. So she, for example, did not have a phone at all, not even a feature phone. Secondly, I want to go into I'll get back into this bit just a little bit later. I want to describe briefly the process of what happens at this recycling sorting facility. So the workers are expected to sit on either side of a moving line where each bag of trash is opened. The workers sitting on the sides then segregate it into whatever kind of waste it is. So what kind of plastic it is, depending on that, what kind of paper it is put into big heaps. So at the very start, there is one worker who is laying out all the individual pieces. At the next step, there is a worker who uses a barcode scanner to scan every item. This they do so that they can analyze what are the sort of waste plastics and all that they're getting. So this, and then it moves on to, to get segregated, which is done by hand, like I said. So so due to this kind of work, Pankaj, who was the manager, he says that the labor is not unskilled, it is semi-skilled. They need to train the workers for 3-4 days before they can start doing this work. And the work of scanning, where they use a barcode scanner to look at the kind of waste that has come, that takes possibly even longer, he said. So I have a couple of images here just to show how it looks. So this is the area where the sorting happens. It's not very visible here, but there is a sort of an assembly line here which moves. This is the area where the bags are packed. The bags are sent to customers, who will then fill those bags, and then they'll get sent here again. All the bags that are here, there are a lot of bags which they came from different cities. So there's only one sorting facility across like 3-4 cities. So all the trash actually is transported from, say, Bombay to Hyderabad, and then it takes place. All the sorting happens in Hyderabad itself. Yeah. So now, as far as what interested me a lot here is the technology that was used for the sorting bit. Who got to run those machines and so on and so forth. So there is some amount of upward mobility or hierarchy involved with someone who is going to be seated at the scanning table. One is that it will require some special kind of skilling. So who gets to do it is sort of ambiguous, so to speak. So one thing is that the person who is sitting there has to have some already existing comfort with devices. So for example, when I was there, Shaila, who's just a second. Yeah, she was 31. She was the one who was doing the barcode scanning bit. So I asked her if, she was doing the sorting work. So I asked her if she would be interested in the scanning work also, because one thing is that it's definitely more comfortable. it's even with the sorting, for example, the woman will have to get up and do the work, and it is physically taxing. But scanning, you can sit and do, and it's not as physically taxing. So she said that I would love to do it, but that she thinks that it would be very difficult for her to learn how to do this. And she said that it would be almost impossible for me to compete with the younger girls who are very comfortable with using a computer or a mobile phone and so on and so forth. Although, yeah, I'll get into that later. The manager also says that he was of the opinion that although he himself said that there have been exceptions, that workers who had attended school till like 8th or 9th, they are more likely to pick up this sort of the work that was the scanning work. Even though this was not something that they required as a company, but they said that it's easier for us to train someone who has some experience, who's underwent some kind of formal education up till a point. The manager also said that the work, the way it works is that any of the women workers who is in sorting or any other part of the process, they can approach the floor manager if they want additional responsibilities and so on, and then they'll be trained and then they can do the scanning job. There is a increase in salary also. This was the time when the manager mentioned to me that so there might be a person who has received training in, say, scanning, but they will still have to do sorting work. So there will still be circulation, there will still be rotation. And his point was that he offered me the information that they ensure that no worker sits in the same chair all the time. His rationale was that we do this because so that they do not feel as if any of the physical chairs is their chair. This, he said, that has led to conflict in the past. So they want to make sure that there's some amount of rotation that continues to happen. Something similar was mentioned by the by the supervisor in the housekeeping company that I mentioned, that they do not assign the same building to the same pair of workers, to clean the same building to the same pair of workers, so that they do not get used to a certain level of work or kind of work. Or also, this was mentioned in passing, but I think there's value here, that they don't get too familiar with any of the residents in the building. Although they do try to keep the pairs together so that it's easier for them to work together. That was one thing. Now, let me also clarify that in the recycling company, when the scanning and sorting takes place, the computer interface that uses the barcode scanning happens and all that, it's not a very complicated technology. It is they just scan the barcode with the barcode scanner. It says success on the top when it is identified, and then the item moves on. So it's not particularly difficult, and yet there is some sort of a sense of pride associated with having learned it. So what I mean is that the one thing is that the workers in the facility were previously mostly they worked in other factories. So the facility is in an industrial area. So their previous work was in some factory, which would usually have, again, unskilled to semi-skilled labor, particularly since they were women. It would usually be unskilled work. But here they would, one of the workers, for example, she was very, there was a sense of pride in her admitting that they had to be trained for it and that she learned it in like 2 days.
Sorry to interrupt, but is it possible for you to wrap up? Because we just have no time.
Yeah, I understand. So that was just to quickly, I'll wrap up actually. So one thing that I couldn't completely sort of make sense of, and I'm still trying to understand, is that there were a few women there who did not use, for example, their mobile phones beyond leisure activities. So that includes WhatsApp, Telegram, things like that. And I would even say, so one of the workers, for example, Anita, who was in her late 20s actually, she was showing me how she downloads movies and watches films on her phone and so on, which to me seemed like a fairly complicated process. And yet she said that she didn't use UPI or any sort of banking services on her phone. When I asked her why, she said that, that again is something that her husband takes care of. One, because well, he takes care of the finances of that sort. And second, that it was that she was afraid that she would do it wrong, because there was some risk associated with, she was afraid that she would make a mistake, and there would be some fraudulent activity that would happen on her account, and so on and so forth. So there was this sort of sense of fear, which I'm still having trouble sort of understanding. Yeah, I think I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Chinar, for giving us your insights into this. I would invite Professor Pooja for her remarks and further questions. Meanwhile, I would also like to remind everybody to ask their questions in the chat, which Saisha will be taking up soon.
Hi, Chinar. Thank you for that, and thank you for your presentation, which took us really into the heart of the field, as it were. You're sharing with us your experiences of the field, and I can already sense the first level of insights that would inform a complex environmental and sectoral sort of analysis of sanitation work in Hyderabad. And I think what struck me was that your observations on access to mobile technology and access to managing money, it's very relevant. It reminds me of your piece on the FemLab blog, very compellingly titled, "What Does the Abandoned Toilet Tell Us?" And in that piece, you draw attention to the gaps in questions of access versus questions of use. And you point to the shadows of context that would have made that design intervention, such as that toilet, more relevant to the lives of the rural and peri-urban communities for whom it was built. So if I could ask you, when I was listening to you, I thought of this: what does the non-existent banking app on these women's mobile interfaces tell us? That is, if I heard you right, you said that they do not access, and so in a certain sense, that app itself is not there on their interface, or they don't access it via mobile technology. So it shows. So your field experiences show that even those younger women who have access to mobile technology have a fair level of technical literacy, but without seemingly the agency of use that may really make them more visible as stakeholders. How does this, if I could push you to sort of think about, if not immediately answer, but at least think about, how does this inform celebratory discourses around technology and gendered empowerment, right? And I think more relevantly to your sort of sector, how would this how would such understanding sort of inform payment processes at these startups that you were looking at? So if you want to respond to that, maybe I could take a pause and ask the next question, or if you want me to move on ahead to the next question, we could take it as you wish.
I can answer both together if that's okay.
Okay. So my second question is really a continuity of the same sort of frame that you offered. What does the abandoned toilet tell us? So what does the abandoned app tell us? And so in the same spirit, what does the shared chair tell us, right? You mentioned your observation where, and of course you asked the manager about what that is. That is, the chair belongs to no one, and it's a point of conflict often within that space. What does it tell us in particular about maybe the network of relations between the employer, which is the recycling company here, and the workers, and the relationships between the workers themselves? What does it tell us? How do we understand that from that little piece of observation and your interaction with all involved?
Thank you, Pooja. So for the first part, actually that bit was and I don't want to be overplaying that the workers are not using payment processes at all, because they do. There were for example, probably I shouldn't draw this connection, but one of the women who was in the scanning, who was doing the scanning work, she does use, for example, Paytm, UPI, everything, and she has complete control of whatever she's getting and so on. But whatever her salary is getting and her bank account and so on. So it's not that they weren't using it at all, but the reason as to why I was a bit surprised, which is why it stayed with me. I was a bit surprised with the other workers' testimony, where she said that I'm afraid that I'll mess it up, which didn't seem like it was I don't understand where that fear sort of is coming from. So on one hand, there is also the idea of literacy, that okay, some of them might not know how to use it at all. If they have a feature phone, if they don't have a smartphone, that's totally pretty much out of their scope. But then there is also this. So I don't know how, if this is a prevalent sentiment, or I mean, I'm still working through this bit, at least, this part of fear, at least, that in spite of having the skill and in spite of having the means, it's still not something that this particular worker is taking care of. Yeah, that is one thing. Second, about the abandoned chair, also a bit of a question mark for me. I mean, because one thing that, as far as the relationship between the employer and the workers is concerned, I found that the sort of things that would benefit the employees actually is coming from a very different rationale. So, for example, at this recycling company, they make sure to tell their customers that any of your bags, you're only supposed to put dry waste in it, so cardboard, plastic, and so on. So they'll very particularly say this. If someone doesn't follow through, if there is even if there's a contamination in those bags, so any kind of wet waste or any kind of waste that they are not prepared to handle, they'll be fined for it, or they will completely not stop collecting waste from that particular home. Now this benefits the workers, so because then it means that they have to work with items which are not contaminated, so to speak. But actually, the reason why the company pushes on this is because it will not allow them to be able to recycle those things very well. Similarly, in the housekeeping company, again, there was this one with a GHMC sanitation worker that I spoke to. They received some protective equipment like a month or two ago, which is a long time to be without new equipment. But in the housekeeping company, they receive them very regularly, the mask, the gloves, and so on. That is particularly because they are working in such close proximity to residential buildings, like within residential buildings, that the people living there will be forcing them to. So they have to sort of make sure. So all the sort of the good things that happens for the employees, I don't know if this is how I should put this, but the good things that are happening because of some other reason. It is not for concern for the workers, I would say, as such, but because there is pressure. So which also sort of points to this direction that a lot of civil action is sort of required to do something about any of the issues that the workers are facing. And as far as the abandoned, the chair is concerned, while the workers there are, they might seem like a homogeneous group, and they possibly did seem that way to me to some extent, but there are clearly factions within it. So the way that also they will have lunch will be in those groups. There was definitely a at least while they were lunching, there is definitely a caste grouping that happens, and that's how they go and have their food. But those are also the lines on which these sort of conflicts happen, when there is a chair that isn't available, or someone takes a chair and then there's a conflict. So that also sort of happens there.
Interesting. So Chinar, did this recycling company use technology? I mean, did it leverage technology while interfacing with its customers?
With the customers, yeah, but very, very basic actually. Just to show, okay, we've collected this from your place, and so on. Not too much.
I asked this because we were going around some properties, and I realized that one of the promises that a lot of real estate major makes is that we will use technology to invisibilize your contact with garbage, right? With the disposal of garbage, and technology is often leveraged, to sort of counter the socialities of disgust, right, that informs sanitation work. So it promises minimal contact, it smooths over possible encounters with different class, and of course, sometimes gender is also involved in that. And we see that aplenty. We see that in smart city narratives. This is Hyderabad after all. Claims of Swachh Bharat, Smart Bharat discourses. So how does this, how does it inform the invisibilities of these women workers in the recycling company that you are that you were working in. I can see that a starting point would be the caste sort of perspective that you picked up on by the way in which they sort of ate together, or they were driven by conflict in certain ways. But my interest is really what are the intersectional ways in which we can understand the invisibilities of these women workers within the sort of technological sort of interface that this company has with its customers. So are there possibilities to use an intersectional approach to understand this? And if we have time, I can ask another question, but I think we'll have to move to the Q&A soon. So yes.
There's less to say in the recycling company bit, because one thing that they do is they don't really explicitly say, of course, that the waste that the people are going to be collecting in those big blue bags, they are going to be sorted by hand by someone. That was something, honestly, that was surprising to me also, that those are separated by hand. Although when you think about it, how else are they going to be done? But in the housekeeping bit, there was this one thing that, in fact, one of the male workers said to me, was that they are told that they're cleaning during the morning, and during other times also, usually during the morning, the waste is collected, they clean the building and so on and so forth. And they're like, one of the things that they're told is to minimize their contact with residents. So to not ask them too many questions, to not knock on the door to ask for something, things like that. So now it doesn't mean that they don't do it at all. They don't knock on the residents' doors at all. Sometimes it is necessary and they're allowed to do that, but they're told to minimize it, is the thing. So in that sense, they're not being seen, so to speak. And that's the sort of experience that you get in that sort of a residential colony, right? So in part, it is of course technology that is used to further this sort of a thing. But it is also that it's not just the technology. I mean, it's also the supervisors, it's the people themselves who are being told this again and again, that you're not supposed to be seen. So it's sort of complicated, yeah.
Taisha, can I ask another question, or should we just move over to the question answer?
I think, let's move over to the Q&A. Okay. But if you have time, you can ask over there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pooja. You added a lot of depth to the discussion.